Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about troubleshooting installation problems with installing Windows 10. So, normally installation can occur without any issues whatsoever. However, if you are the unlucky individual that has an issue, then sometimes troubleshooting what's happening is just, well, it becomes a nightmare. For example, maybe we have a media error type issue, and that's whether we have an install like a DVD, whether we have a USB drive, and one of those options, maybe the medium is actually damaged. So normally what we'd have to do is make sure that the medium is not damaged, make sure that they're functional, and that we can work off of them. That's how we fix that. Insufficient disk space. We already know that Windows 10 32 bits requires 16 gigs. If we're looking at installing a 64-bit OS, we need about 20 gigs of free space. With modern hard drive spaces being what they are, this is typically not an issue. However, if you partition the drives and you do a smaller partition, then you may run into issues. You have to make sure, just for core Windows features, you have to make sure there's at least 16 gigs free if you're installing 32-bit OSs. If you're installing the 64-bit version, you have to make sure there's 20 gigs free, if not more. Next, memory. Memory is always an issue. However, with modern day systems, this really shouldn't be an issue anymore. If you have a 32-bit system, you have to have at least 1 gig of memory. If you're installing the 64-bit version of Windows 10, you have to have 2 gigs of memory. I've encountered this pretty common when you're dealing with older hardware. If you're dealing with a 5-6-year-old computer, having less memory may be pretty common. I've installed Windows 10 on some pretty old machines, but you have to make sure there's enough memory in the machine to be able to handle Windows 10. What about if there's not enough processing power? Windows 10 does require at least a gigahertz of processor or more. If you're barely doing the bare minimum, performance is going to take a hit. So if you only have a single 1 gigahertz processor, Windows 10 may not be the option. Hardware that is not on the HCL or the hardware compatibility list. We've seen in previous videos that trying to install Windows 10 as an upgrade to Windows 7 had some issues. We had to remove the floppy drive, had to remove the optical drive, had to remove the sound card. And then it finally worked. For whatever reason, even though that hardware was on the HCL, it just refused to do the upgrade. So sometimes hardware could be on the HCL, but the drivers may not be compatible with Windows 10. That's always a concern. Or hardware could be misconfigured. That's also another common issue. When we were doing our upgrade from Windows 10 Home to Windows 10 Pro, I ran into the issue of my Windows 10 Professional key already being used. So it gave me an incorrect product key. So it would not let me upgrade or activate based off of that key because it was already activated. So I had to use a different key. I used a Windows 10 Education key instead. Verifying you have a correct product key is crucial for the upgrading process. If you are doing a fresh install, you may get the option of installing without a Windows key, but it will not let you activate it. Failure to access network. So if you're doing a remote install over the network, if anything that interrupts the network connectivity may cause this type of issue. Also, while upgrading to Windows 10 from home, we had a short lapse in internet access, and immediately the upgrade failed, saying no, could not connect to Microsoft servers, and it stopped the installation. Sometimes you can install Windows 10 without internet access. However, if you're installing the actual install files are network based, then you need that network connectivity to be able to copy the install files. Lastly, a lot rarer, but it does happen, if you're installing Windows and you're doing it on a non-supported hard drive, trying to install Windows on an Xbox hard drive, for example, you can do it. It's just maybe that drive may not be supported, so you may have to finagle it more than you would in a normal installation. Installation, for the most part, is pretty straightforward, pretty simple, but there are definitely times when it's not as easy as it should be. That is all we had for our common installation issues, and I kind of walked through ways to mitigate. Remember that sometimes the mitigation is you just cannot be allowed to upgrade to Windows 10. If you have improper hardware, you won't be allowed to upgrade to Windows 10 until the hardware is replaced. If you have hardware not on the HCL, the only way to do the installation is to replace the hardware that's not on the HCL. If you have issues with drivers, you're going to have to find current drivers that function and work. There are only so many ways around these installation issues if you are the individual unfortunate enough to have these issues. Again, pretty common. When you do your upgrades or your installations, there may not be any issues. That's a pretty common occurrence. But if it does have an issue, if it does happen, you need to make sure you understand how to proceed and how to troubleshoot. Alright, that is all in this video. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out.